work. Hello, everybody. I cannot see you. I just see the camera. Good. So I'm here in my so-called Lake Valley Retro Labs. That's kind of my castle, especially in those days. It's nice to be in your own place and don't have to wear a mask because you're all alone. So I will hold an introduction session on the Sinclair QL, which is a 68008 CPU-based professional computer from the mid-1980s. Okay, I will do most of the things live. I want to show you what it is all about when we talk about the Sinclair QL. So to start, I give you a short overview of where the company Sinclair started when they started the project. So company Sinclair is a British enterprise which was quite famous already in the 1970s with very innovative products like calculators, digital watches, small televisions, and they produced one of the first really cheap home computer, the so-called Sinclair ZX81. In the US, it was sold by Timex as Timex Sinclair 1000. So this was basically my first computer I had at the age of about 15. And beside of this computing, I grew up with a lot of gaming. So I was an ATARI kid. And this continued until about 20 years ago when I was still playing some like Aliens versus Predator games. So Sinclair, after the ZX81, they brought out the ZX Spectrum in April 1982. This was their most successful home computer. It was Z80 based, and it came with an ecosystem with their own microtypes called microdrives. That was an alternative to floppy disk drives, and with some additional peripherals. And they sold altogether millions of that computer, mainly in Europe. And they brought out also some upgrades to it over the years. So Sinclair had this Spectrum, and here is a Spectrum without the case. So it was a motherboard with a Z80 CPU, with a ULA, with custom logic, with ROM, with the BASIC and some routines. I don't call it operating system, but some routines to manage the hardware. And it came with up to 48K of RAM, and it had some additional plug-in cards, one with serial port, network ports, and the controller for micro drives, plus one card for adding ROM cartridges and having joystick ports. So that was the hardware laying around in Sinclair, and they hired a new team and they wanted to build a so-called Super Spectrum computer. They were evaluating different hardware platforms, and they came to the 68008 chip from Motorola, which internally was the same 32-bit architecture as the other chips of the family, but it had an external 8-bit data bus, making it very easy, for example, to bring it in that hardware where all the data bus is 8-bit. So in summer 1982, they started the project, and I opened shortly a book here. That's the service manual for the QL, and it's written there. I'm not sure you can read it. The QL computer can be regarded in hardware terms as a combination of an enhanced spectrum microcomputer, an interface 1, an interface 2, and 2 microdrives within the same case. So that was the story written down in the engineering specs introduction. So as said, they started the project called ZX 83. You can spot it here. And what came out was a single board where everything was integrated properly. So we have the 68008 CPU. We have an ASIC for a memory controller and display generator, interrupt handler, clock rate stuff. Then 128K of RAM. Then there is an intelligent peripheral controller. In fact, it's a second CPU which has its own internal RAM and ROM, comparable to an embedded controller on today's PC motherboards. And this, together with the so-called peripheral chip and other chips, and 2 ROMs. So then on the same board, they added the 2 microdrives with the controller chips and the tape heads. So this was done on 1 PCBA and then cut off and assembled into the case. So as a result, you got a very sleek and nice industrial design case with a proper keyboard. It really has moving keys, plastic keyboard, and you have the 2 drives here, and you have an expansion port on the left-hand side. So all based on the 68,000 family. This attracted me when I was at about age of 15, 16, and this became kind of my dream machine. So before the dream started, I want to show you how the machine was launched to the market. So I have here a PC, a notebook, and on the notebook, I show you first a short video, 1 minute, from a British TV docudrama called Microman, which was done some 10 years ago, and it shows, played with actors, the launch of the QL.
Represents just that in the home and business computer market. It's a brand new operating system incorporating super basic, an innovative built-in micro drive data storage system, and yet another revolutionary keyboard. It really is sheer professional power in the Sinclair style. With all these features, you could be forgiven for expecting to pay quite literally thousands of pounds. But no, the Sinclair QL will sell for merely $399. But before I hand you over to our head of computing, Nigel Searle, just fill you in on some details, let me be the first to say the future is here, and it's ready to ship in 28 days.
So that is how it's been in a drama, in a docudrama played by actors. But the real event was really similar. That's a real picture from the Sinclair QL launch event on January 12, 1984, with Sir Clive Sinclair here. And on the right-hand side, it's Nigel Searle, the managing director. And there is also footage of that original launch.
Machine made overseas. Made in Britain exclusively for the foreseeable future. It's produced initially for us by Thorn EMI. We've been searching the world for the best talent, and we've been putting brain drain people back from the States. It is coming along well. I'm sorry, but that's all I can say. It's a close to bit machine, a combination of features and make it work. Thank you, Carl. To your right hand side. Thank you very much.
So, Carl, what's the status of your collaboration with ICL?
How many do you hope to sell? We're starting production about 20,000 a month, building up to 100,000 a month over the course of a year. What the final sales volume will be, it's too early to tell.
Good. So that was the relaunch of the machine, and the QL was launched 12 days earlier than Steve Jobs unveiled the Apple Macintosh in the US. So that was one goal of the Sinclair company, to really beat Apple by the date. They succeeded, but for a high price. So the machine was not really ready for the market. Later on in the year 1982, the collaboration with British computer company ICL resulted in a Sinclair QL for the executive desk. It's called One Per Desk. It's a joint venture between Sinclair and ICL. In fact, it's a custom motherboard by ICL using Sinclair technology, and also the same CPU, 68008, the Sinclair custom chips, the micro drives, but ICL went with their own operating system and built their own ecosystem. Good, so the whole thing evolved over the years, so it may be known that Sinclair had to stop building the QL after 2.5 years, but the developers and the market was still there, so the operating system was adapted for the ATARI ST line. It was sold as SMS2 on a ROM cartridge for the ST with some utility disks and development documentation. So I went the path of buying quite a few STs and worked with them until about the mid-1990s. I even moved one day to a C-Lab Falcon with the 68030 CPU, but did not really do a lot with that computer. And as a collector, I also have one or two Next stations, because I think they are the most beautiful incarnation of a 68K machine available. Good. Talking of the Next, I want to show you, because here we are on Planet M68K, a very nice collector item. This is an unpopulated Next computer motherboard, and it's signed by one of the engineers of Next, signed by Tim Bucher. Very nice collector's item here. So that's a bit the history. I want to now show you what I call the QL ecosystem, the original Sinclair QL ecosystem. On that table here, I have only Sinclair branded stuff. That means no third-party stuff. Everything here is made by or sold under the brand of Sinclair. So even the machine was commercially not a big success. Only about 150,000 machines were built and sold. Many were sold on a discount price when they went out of market. But Sinclair really invested a lot to build complete ecosystems around the computer itself. They had high quality RGB monitor. They had a floppy disk expansion system. They had a printer made by Sinclair, Sinclair branded. They even commissioned a modem system, which is a stack system with RS-232 buffering system with a call unit and the modem itself. And also a lot of paperwork like brochures or software catalogs or annual catalogs. They even entered the US market with the machine in spring 1985. And no computer can live without software. So mainly QL was targeted for small businesses, also for educational market and software enthusiast programmers. So there were quite a few packages from Sinclair themselves. And no computer can live without games. So there were some games sold by Sinclair. The two most well-known is QL Chess by Psyon, which is the 1984 computer chess world champion. And there's QL Pawn by Magnetic Scrolls, which became a very famous adventure on multiple platforms. But version 1.0 was developed on and for the QL. And funny thing is that one of the two founders of Magnetic Scroll, Anita Sinclair, has the Sinclair name, but she's not related to Sir Clive. So I have here a QL which is open and it is running. You see the screen here shows a demo application by Sinclair for a retail demo. The demo application was on EEPROMs in the expansion bay, and this specific machine is special because in 2014 it was signed by Rick Dickinson, who did the industrial design, and by David Carlin, who was the chief design engineer for the electronics. On that QL here, there is one special thing. It has as I told you, there's no third-party stuff, but there is. Here is a so-called Super Gold card in the machine. That's a 68020 CPU card with 4 mega RAM. And it's running one of my 1986 made demos for the QL, which is an animation which I called it that back in the day, Amiga-like, but in the typical Sinclair style. Okay, so that was a brief show of the Sinclair branded ecosystem. Now I move towards where I play with the QL, and I want to show you and give some information about QL software distributions in the last 20 years. So there had been several CDs produced with QL emulators and with the software collection. First one here was 1998. Then I did my first one in 2001, 2002 called QLE, a distribution which I'm still maintaining. So this is the golden sample CD from 2002. The same year, there was the first DVD called QL 2002, the DVD. It has videos on it, the movie, but also a collection of the CDs with the software and emulators. Then the DVDs became popular, and the only remaining QL publication called QL Today had one DVD in 2011, one in 2013 with the final print issue. And then I did in 2014 the so-called the distribution, which is a 4.7 gigabyte full of QL information and software. I will have some infos on the distributions later on. So here I have a desk with hardware expansions. As I mentioned before, maybe I am maintaining those distributions, and goal is that they are running on real QLs as well as in the emulators. So for real QL, you need real hardware to test, and a distribution which is a single code base with a single boot script is quite challenging to make sure it runs on all the different hardware platforms. So I have here different floppy disk controllers, I have hard disk controller, I have memory expansions from an early 64K RAM expansion from 1984 to a 640 kilobyte expansion to a more modern 2020 made all-in-one card with about giving the QL the whole memory range of the 1 megabyte for ROM, IO, and RAM. And here, this is the most powerful ever made QL expansion. It's the Super Gold card with 68020 CPU. And this is the original one from the 1993, but a guy in Russia called Tetroid as an alias is still building them, and you can buy them either on eBay or Sell My Retro. And I have here one of my QLs. I like the QLs open with the keyboard detached, and makes it easier to change the configuration. So this is basically my test bench for the original CPU, and it runs here QLE. The distribution, we can shortly start the chess application which you saw in the ecosystem. So I don't have the mouse enabled. Here is the chess application, and the famous thing from the visuals that the chess has a 3D display, and it's on the high resolution of the QL, the 512 by 256 pixel resolution with 4 colors. And even the QL has no blitter or nothing. It's smooth animation, and the game is really still powerful. I am not able to win a single game of chess here. Good. Then the next machine on the desk is another Sinclair QL. This is the German language edition with the keyboards of the German language. Sinclair made international versions for all major countries in Central Europe back then. And this machine has an internal mouse interface. So I can really do mouse control here. And it also has QLE, the distribution booted. And we can also start chess on that machine. So the startup was much faster because 68020 with its own RAM, that's really a difference. You see also the chessboard was painted faster, and the game animation is a bit too fast already. Good. Now we move towards my PC. So you saw from the presentation, I'm very much in 68K family from my history, but nowadays I use PCs with Intel CPU. So this is a Core i7 machine, my workhorse, and I'm now adding the camera to a pole and see if it works out. Good. I want to show you, not sure, maybe Carsten, can you give me a feedback? Do you see this Excel sheet?
Yes, I see it. It's a little bit hard to read.
Yeah, let's see what we can do. Try to zoom it a bit. That's the maximum I can do. Okay, I want to show you just in brief about the operating system. You know, the QL's operating system called QDOS has a preemptive task scheduler. It's a kernel which has a really preemptive multitasking features. And the operating system is on the Motorola side of programming. It's based on trap routines. That means from the trap calls of the CPU, trap 0 to trap 4, if I remember correctly, are implemented for different system management tasks like memory and resource allocation and so on. So those trap routines, trap calls are most of the time atomic and do a nice protection of resources. So the QDOS is not working with semaphores or something. It has a different way of making sure that different tasks are not colliding and not eating the other resources or getting the system messed up. So that's very nice implementation. Then the kernel also has a set of vector routines, which are in the vector table in the bottom of the memory map. Those routines are more kind of utilities and support routines of the operating system, like providing services for the basic interpreter or for a maths library and many other things. And QDOS offers a device-independent I/O. So in the trap and vector routines, there is a I/O handler, and you just then implement a device driver, which has the physical layer, and you fill the logical layer according to those I/O handling rules. And in the original operating system, there were different I/O devices. So there is a console driver, which is doing bitmapped console on the screen with keyboard input. And similar to that, there's a screen-only display driver, which has the same capabilities, but no keyboard input, so no console possibilities. Then there is full serial port drivers. There's the network I/O drivers. There are two drivers for doing the network of the QL. Then there's a pipe driver for inter-task communication and the micro drive for the micro type drivers. And all that works with the hardware layer here on line 8. Then the system is fully expandable. That means you can even redefine trap calls. You can redefine device drivers. You can load system extensions. It's really a nice concept. So you can still use almost 40 years old kernel and load the latest drivers and have a modern system. So that is happening over there on those two machines. It's old kernel with latest drivers and system extensions. Then the programs which you run on the QL operating systems, they are called jobs. In other operating systems, you would call them tasks, but task is something else in the QL namespace. A task is more something which is done by an interrupt scheduler. So it's a timed task to do tiny things. Applications are called jobs. They are in transient program area. That means you can load them and unload them, and they do fully multitask. So job number 0 is always the super basic interpreter. So Sinclair did not fully develop that in the early days, so it was just able to run one instance, but later on versions of the operating systems enable to run you multiple super basic command line interpreters in parallel. And then you load executables from media. You have the possibility even to share the code base and start them in a way that they are not loaded again. Only the data area is copied in memory, so it's very memory efficient. You can run 10 word processor and only have the code in RAM once, and then only 10 sets of its data. And you can run servers, different type of servers. The most common used are file servers, network file servers for the QL network hardware, or for a network on MIDI-net or on serial ports, or even on TCP/IP. So the basic rule is still valid for the most modern operating system, which is called SMSQE. It's just expanded. So as said, this is a simplified drawing of the operating system architecture. It's not really very accurate, but the extension's very powerful. It's the pointer interface, the mouse control, which was added, and the window manager for really having nice GUIs with menus and display elements, which are known from other operating systems. Then there is a so-called hotkey system, which is a system-wide control element to have single keystroke actions on operating system levels, like to pop up windows or to start jobs and the like. And then there is a powerful things system. Things is a mixture what you know from operating systems, from DLLs, libraries, shared code. It's as the name said, things are possibly almost everything which is code and data, and there's a proper architecture and interface in the system. And the device drivers has been highly expanded. So we now, for an example, have named pipes were done, or many different device drivers to like floppy disks, to hard disk drives, even when you're running on an emulator to the file system of the host computer, or when using SD cards to have access to the FAT system of the SD card. So this is a very brief schematic of the operating system architecture. Good. I want to show you the distribution in 2 ways. So I'm not the only one doing a distribution. The one I'm maintaining is called QLE, for QL environment. There's another one called Black Phoenix, and I will show you both. So QLE is on a Windows PC is most best started with a QL emulator called QPC2. I started shortly, and QPC2 is a 68020 implementation, and it takes about 10 seconds for the complete system to be started. And then you have a full desktop system like you have on your Windows desktop, but it's QL based. That means all the, give me a second, all the user interface is not really like in Windows, no Alt-Tab to switch tasks. Here it's done with Control-C, or you have hotkeys to pick up jobs like the basic interpreter. You can switch it to a different screen mode, command line interpreter mode, and you have the menus like the start menu, where again we can start the so-called famous chess. And the chess game is a nice example that really QLE enables you to run all the QL software included on all different hardware platforms, from the original old Sinclair QL hardware to upgraded machines with stronger processors to virtual systems. That's the goal of the QLE system, to have one environment. And QLE comes with QL emulators for Windows, for Java, that means platform independent, and also for native Linux, some native Linux emulators. I'm going to show you shortly on that machine here. That's a PC which has a Debian, the Raspberry Pi edition on a PC. And I start also QLE here. With the Java system, you see again the same boot script. You give him a key and it loads. Okay, it's a bit slower than the native Windows one because Java is not that fast as native Intel 68K machine and C code, but it's a very nice portable way to the QL system on any system which runs Java 7, 8, or 11. Good. Then there's the other maintained distribution called Black Phoenix. This gives a bit more to do for first-time user. It's just supplied as a QL file system. You must get the emulator of choice by your own and do the configuration by your own. So here's my pre-configured Black Phoenix. It's made by some Italians. Some nice startup animation. And then it does a boot process similar to QLE. I think about 70% of the installed applications are the same. The desktop system is the same. So you have free choice to use a different kind of QL systems. So that was about a short 40 minutes or something introduction of what is Sinclair QL, where it came from, how it developed, evolved, how it was in his niche market, and how we chose nowadays. So that's the official part of the presentation. Before I end, I give you two more small things, which is some links to the web. So on the internet, if you want to know more about Sinclair QL or what I'm doing with the QL, there's a YouTube channel called QL versus Jaguar. Jaguar because the ATARI Jaguar, which was also equipped with a 68K CPU. I'm nowadays mainly do QL videos on that channel. Then there's the SinclairQL.net website, which is kind of semi-official Sinclair because I'm talking with many former Sinclair staff and got many internal documents to be able to publish them there. And mainly I publish a new version of QLE and the bigger distribution on it. If you want to know a bit more about me, there's a About Me page, but to make it short, and you may have heard it, I'm not native English speaker. I'm Swiss, German speaking. I'm born 1960, so I'm in my early 50s. And yeah, my story is there. Then when you're interested in the operating system, it's now open source. There's a site called the official SMS QE site. You can download source code either for studying on a PC or to really maintaining it on a QL system, and it has a make tool to build new versions. Maintained by Wolfgang Lennertz, a German who lives in France. And another good QL resource is Kilgus.net, a site by Marcel Kilgus. He developed the QPC2 Windows QL emulator, and he's also one of the maintainer of the operating system, and he does very many nice tech projects, like here this 2020 made hardware called QL VGA, which gives you crystal clear picture from RGB signal of the QL to a VGA monitor. And the last site I want like to mention is Dilwyn Jones Sinclair QL pages. It's the biggest repository of QL information and software. But for starters, I think QLE is the faster way to start, because with Dilwyn stuff, you must know a little bit more about the QL. You must set up your own system first, and then to unzip the software packages and configure them. So that's QL on the internet if you want to know more. And for another evening chat, what I could do is to show how the QL system works on FPGAs. There is the MIST FPGA, which has a QL support. It also runs QLE. And there's a native QL made in FPGA technology called Q68. I have both at home. They are installed there and cabled, so that's why I did not bring them here. That would be maybe something for another session. So that's it, folks. Hope you enjoyed it, and hope you have some questions.
Thank you, Urs. Yeah, I'm blown away. That was really impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, my pleasure.
So yeah, I've collected a couple of questions. The first one, let me see, why 68008 and not 68000 like all the others?
Yeah, that's I think internally at Sinclair back in the day, you know, they started in August 1982, and they came from 8-bit computers. So they had those very successful Sinclair ZX81 and ZX Spectrum, and you see they all their hardware knowledge about data bus, about peripheral chip, everything which was really the PCBA, the heartbeat, the data bus is 8-bit. So they were looking for the most performance 8-bit chip around with the most potential to upgrade. So for them, it was like the best of both worlds to make a cheap machine. It's not so much the CPU price only, you know, the RAM is 8-bit then, and the ROM is 8-bit, and peripheral chip are 8-bit, and you know, the ASIC and the custom chip, the package. When back in the day you went from a 40-pin package to 48 or 64-pin, this many times doubled or even more the price of those chips. So Sinclair really wanted to have a relatively cheap machine, and you know what you got for those 399 British pound, which was about 1,200 Swiss francs, or 1,600 Deutsche Marks, or 499 US dollar, was so much that, okay, sure, bring in 68,000 like Apple did, or like Atari did 1.5 years later, January 85, you know, would have made the system much more expensive and not that easy to build. So that was their main decision. But along the road, they had an internal project in 1985 called the Tai Chi. There is a ROM around 68 a 64 kilobyte large operating system ROM, where they internally used the 68,000 chip and the 6820. Intention was to launch that in 1986, but this never materialized. That's about a bit of the explanation. Sinclair was very cost sensitive. To save every penny was quite important.
Yeah, that was the Sinclair way, I guess.
Yeah, that was their way. Yeah.
Another question directly about you. Were you a user of the QL at the time, or did you start later collecting the QLs?
I said I had a Sinclair ZX80 when I was about 15. That was in 1983. Then when the QL rumors came around and I get attracted, I saved my money, you know, which I get on birthday and Christmas and so on, to buy the machine. It was for me bloody expensive, because then you need also a screen and printer and everything. And we had a Sinclair user group in Switzerland, which I was member. We met every second Saturday or something, and there were some QLs around. So I started programming on the QL, bringing my media on Saturday, doing my programs, and then go home. And it took me about 1.5 years to get the money together. So in Christmas sale 1985, I bought my first Sinclair QL German edition. In fact, it's that machine on the table. I own that since January 1986, and it was on a reduced price and edition 10% sale. So, and I immediately started to write software packages and sold them to friends and to the user group and to user group members in Germany, and did advertisement in UK and Germany, like magazine from Markt and Technik, or all the QL publications. And yeah, I made, beside my professional education, I made quite some pocket money with my QL activities. I financed all the hardware expansions I needed, and also I financed the traveling to the QL shows. And then the whole thing, when I got older and started my professional career, the QL were packed in boxes, and I lost quite interest. And it was around 2001, 2002, when I started to redo the hobby more as a research of the history and as a collector. And yeah, this story is a bit in the About Me page on the website.
Thank you. Someone asked, I've got a boxed QL from a colleague a few years ago. It seems to be, it's implying that it has never been switched on. Are there any stock faults that he should be aware of before powering it off, like refresh or something like that need to be replaced?
Yeah, the good thing is that the electronic design is quite stable. That means not like in 8-bit home computers, the capacitors are not really a problem. And also the RAM and everything is not really connected to such things. So but what can be is like that the machine internally has some problem that the pins in the sockets of the ICs are not that good anymore. And often the keyboard membrane is brittle. So when you fire it up with the power adapter and the original operating system as it's been shipped, it asks for a key press, F1 for monitor operator and F2 for TV. And if the keyboard membrane is dead, then you cannot enter the system. You cannot even boot from media. But they are available, new keyboard membranes, which are much more strong. They will survive forever, maybe. And they are available on eBay or Sell My Retro. And when you open it, because it has no seal, or you want to have a look inside, make sure that the chips sit firmly in the sockets. Other than that, there is little risk.
Thank you. There's one question about your actual setup here streaming. The question is, do you stream directly from the iPhone?
Everything is from the iPhone with 4G. I have only 2 bars on 4G, and my lab here is not in a town or big village. It's on the Greenland, but I have the camera set to highest resolution, and it's on 4G, and it eats my monthly bandwidth. So let's see where we end.
Yeah, but the quality is really, really good. So
okay. Great. I was really not that sure. That's why we tested it yesterday.
Yeah, you've shown several times in your collection there is a mouse with red buttons, and some people were really looking at this because it really looks slick and nice. Are these rare, or are they available still?
Yeah, you mean the mouse?
Yeah.
Nice. So this mouse I have since about 1987. This was a third-party mouse. The same mouse. It's really pin compatible to the ATARI ST.
Oh, even better.
This was an ATARI ST mouse, and the vendor, a third-party vendor in the QL market, chose that one because it's also in black. And red is also one of the main colors of the QL 4-color display. So this is a very old one. I don't think it's still available, but I saw also in the colors, but with the same plastic tooling, ATARI ST mice back in the day. And this is a serial mouse connected with 9-pin connector to the serial port of the QL. I bought on eBay from the UK. It's a made in China product for about $20.
A question about the operating systems. You showed the QDOS Minerva and SMS2 and SSMSQE.
Mm-hmm.
When someone is starting writing software like now, how compatible are there? Is like if someone is testing that on SMS2, SSMSQE, which is, I understand, the open source one now, will it then still work on the QDOS, or does it only depend on the drivers being loaded, or is there some incompatibilities?
Yeah, basically the whole thing is quite compatible. You know, in my professional life, I did many other things, and now I'm CTO mainly for hardware at the company who is building all-in-one PCs for the point of sale. But when I have all our customers, they have to choose an operating system. So the incompatibilities of installed Linux distribution, because some packages are not there, are much worse than what we see on the QL. Normally on the QL, it's much more easy. So when you do it on SSMSQE, for example, writing in BASIC, and you use commands which are only there on the version 3 of the operating system, then you just load them on the Minerva or QDOS. Or if you write an application which is GUI based and you do this on SSMSQE, and then you want to use it on the old QL, then you make sure that the pointer interface, the window manager are loaded. And there is normally only one version of each of those. So that's not that the same big problem like you have maybe 5 Linux distributions and you want to try something on the fly and have no internet connection and you're missing some packages. It's much simpler. There's normally one command called lresper for load something in the resident procedure area, and then you give the file name and it's there. But you know, when you're not known to the platform, you will fall many times.
You've shown the SMS2 for the Atari ST as a ROM cartridge. Is it only available, or was it only available as ROM cartridge, or are there other ways to run SMS2?
It became available in 1983. That was a 7 years after the QL was declared end of life. So all those operating systems always have people involved who were part of the original design team. So one name is Tony Tebby, who was doing a great job at Sinclair and then with SMS2 and SMSQ. And he retired some 20 years ago. And for this ATARI market, he was looking for a distributor, and there was not really a big market for it. So he found a company called First, I think FURST, and they sold that on the ROM cartridge. I'm not aware that it was sold on floppy disks or to be installed on the hard disk drive of an ST. I'm still having the project to read this ST cartridge and extract the content, maybe to use it with Atari ST emulator or on the MIST. One day I should do that. But it's more for historical reason, because the SMSQE is available for multiple platform, and one is includes the Atari ST up to the TT range. You have the latest kernel built 2020.
Oh, that's great. I will test that out. That's interesting.
Yeah.
You mentioned the QL network. What kind of network was that? Possibly not TCP/IP, I guess.
No. I try to show you a second. Give me. Okay, I have here the QL, and it has 2 network ports. So it's a normal audio cable, mono audio cable going from one machine to the other. And then normally you just say that your net station 2 and your net station 1. And okay, now it's challenge. Let's see if we have the file server running. That machine, the server is running. On the other machine, it's not running. So let's see. Yeah. And then you have really full access. So you have to link 2 device drivers. You say, okay, give me a directory of network node 1, and on that machine I want to see RAM drive 1, and then you see the file on the RAM drive 1 of that machine.
That's great.
I can even try, you can do open. It's not only for files, it's a network, it's a peer-to-peer. So let's see how I can do this. I have the problem with the keyboard here. A second. I must get the hashtag. You can even say open a channel number 3 to basic from network device 1 to a console. And then you can say that you want to clear this space. So you have full access to even to all devices here, to memory, to console, to screen, to disk drives. And you can even set like how we do it. I can say do the paper color of the channel 3 to 7. 7 is white. And say you should clean. And then you see over the network, peer-to-peer, machine number 2 took control to the resource, the console resource of that machine. Really powerful with simple electronics.
Thank you. That's really great.
Let's see. The same protocol also works on the emulators on TCP/IP. May it be in your wireless LAN, in your Ethernet at home, and also between the QL emulators from Windows to the one on Java. and you have the same namespace.
Talking about the emulators and modern machine, if someone is working with real old QL hardware, but maybe developing on a modern machine, on an emulator, how is the best way to exchange then the files to test on the real hardware? Like someone is developing on an emulator and then wants to test on the real hardware. What's the best setup for that?
Yeah, the best setup is really what I think the nicest thing is that the QL systems, especially on emulators, the file system, let me show it to you shortly. Can you see here that's a file called qle.win?
Yes.
So the name is not of importance. You can name it as you like. You must only make sure that the device driver of the kernel is configured to find the file. It's like in a virtual machine. It's a virtual disk. So when I open it in a text editor, you see that it has a header that's QLWA. That means it's a container file holding a native QL file system. And with the emulator, when I have it here, and you use the namespace of it's the hard disks on the QL called Win. That's from the old name Winchester drive. You know, the old disk drive in the 60s were Winchesters. So that's why Sinclair's designers decided that it's not HDD or something, but it's Win. And when I do a directory, that's what it's in that container. So you see here, the container name is QLE320. And that was what we saw when we did a view here. So the container files, you put them on a SD card. I show you shortly. You have a SD card, micro SD, and this QL has a micro SD slot here. And up you go.
Great. You are maintaining the QLE distribution?
Yes, that's my main task. Yeah.
Are there any development tools on that distribution?
Yeah, there are the two major basic compilers are there. One is called Turbo Basic, the other QLiberator. To compile BASIC, the benefit is that the code is a bit protected, you know, from that people don't by mistake change something in the program, but from performance-wise, on SMSQE, the interpreted BASIC is almost as fast as compiled one, because it's the way the interpreter works is close to a compiler. And then there are different assemblers and linkers installed. Some people may know that the way the QL modules after assembly are linked, it's the same structure as has been used on the ATARI ST, because the linker was developed by a British company called GSD from Cambridge, and it's the same linker format. So assemblers are there, linkers are there, there are make utilities there. Over the years, many make utilities were developed, so I added some 2 or 3 of them. What it's still missing are the C compilers. That's one thing I have on the task list, so you have to install them on your own. So my thinking was, when a guy is really up to C, then he normally understands the underlying system in a way that he can install the compiler on his own.
So, that's possibly true. So we are almost done with the questions. I have one or two.
That the battery of the iPhone is also almost done.
Okay, I'll be quick. Was a QL ever produced elsewhere outside the UK?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. So Sinclair, when they did the 8-bit computers, they had a factory at the Timex watch company in Scotland, in Dundee, doing millions of those 8-bit machines. But for the QL, they commissioned a company called Forn EMA Datatech, which was a part of the technology and also music company EMI. So those was the part who did more for the army or for telecommunications. So they built the QL near London in a plant. But they also commissioned, and that's really very special, Samsung Electronics in Korea to build the QL. And the QL was built for German market and North American market exclusively in Korea. And the joint venture was really potential. So Sinclair was one of the first big customers for Samsung Electronics to build a computer.
Thank you. And my last question on the list that I have collected is, are there any modern books about the QL?
Yeah, modern books is, I have one. It's not only about, okay, talking about books shortly. There are the 4 books which are the Bible of the Sinclair history. So that's called the Sinclair database, which explains everything happening at Sinclair Research before the QL. Then there is a book called, in German, Alles über Sinclair Computer, which is in fact the same book, but translated to German. Those are both no longer available. Then there's the book by Rodney Dale, which was a friend of Sir Clive Sinclair, called The Sinclair Story. It has a chapter about the QL history. And this is a 1985 book. And another 1985 book is Sinclair and the Sunrise Technology. The later 2 books are, if you Google them a bit, you find them as HTML or PDF. And then there's the book by Linus Torvalds, just for fun. And you may be aware that Linus, after having the Commodore VIC-20 8-bit computer, he bought the QL in Finland, was one of a few Finnish QL user, and did quite a lot of early assembly language operating system stuff. It made him prepared to build Linux. And yeah, but later books are hard to find.
Yeah, I have the last one, luckily. That is a good one.
Yeah. There's one book I have at home. It's about industrial design. It's maybe a 2015 book from the UK. I don't have the name, but it's in one of my other videos.
And that is about the industrial design also on the QL.
Yeah, because, you know, little has survived from electronic engineering prototypes from Sinclair for QL version 2 or QL version 3. But the industrial design has survived by pictures, and they are in a book. Not as full book, but the title page is the QL with wafer stack technology, which is a kind of like a RAM disk.